I'm Bev Adams. I'm an independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up! This is the card I'd like to show you today. This is an easel card, and with just a simple fold, it will become a stand-up card for display. It uses Jar of Love and the coordinating everyday jars framelits. My cardstock is Calypso Coral. It is cut at 4 1/4 by 11, so it's just a half sheet of cardstock. It's scored at 5 1/2, and it's also scored at 2 3/4. So it's got this kind of thing going on. I have a layer of Daffodil Delight that's 5 1/4 by 4, and I have 3 pieces of Whisper White that are 5 by 3 3/4. One of these pieces of Whisper White is going to be a layer here. One will be a layer for the inside of the card, and one will be a layer for cutting up. Actually, as you cut this paper, you will have 1-inch scraps, and you'll be able to get most of the pieces that you need from your scraps. I also have a piece of window sheet that's 2 by 3 1/4. I will be using Calypso Coral, Pool Party, Garden Green, and Daffodil Delight. I will also be using Versamark. Jar of Love is a photopolymer stamp, so I am bringing in my Stampin' Pierce mat, and I'm going to stamp the large jar in the bottom right, and I'm using the Pool Party ink. This stamp is going to be my water, and so I'm going to ink that up, and I'm going to stamp that off on a piece of scratch paper and then just stamp here. There are 2 what I'm calling lacy stems. We've got this one and this one, and I'm using this one. It is printed at a reduced size on the label, so this is what it looks like. And I'm stamping this in Garden Green, and I want to get it down a little bit into the water. And I'm stamping it twice. You could certainly stamp it more and with lower stems, totally up to you. And I'm stamping Thanks in Calypso Coral here on the left side of the jar. And I'm stamping You Fill Me With Happiness in Calypso Coral on the inside. Now we want to be down at least 1.5 inches, 2 inches, maybe even lower. So I'll go close to the middle one this time. You are going to want to stamp and cut out 3 of these large flowers, these 2 flowers which come on one stamp, 2 of these smaller branches. One will be for the inside, the bow, and the jar lid. Rather than tying up the big shot for all of that, for my group I pre-cut out all of those pieces, and we'll use the Stamparatus to stamp them. It's a really good way of saving all the cardstock. Now we could stamp the lid in this area, but I did give my group another piece of scrap, still from the same cutting. I want to make my template, so I've got my Stamparatus. I have my piece of cardstock that's 3 3/4 by 5. I have my large flower and 2 smaller flowers and my green stem. On my other plate I have my 2 flower stamps and my bow. Those will all be in Calypso Coral. So I'll ink up my solid flowers in Daffodil Delight, and I'll ink up my stem in Garden Green, and I will go ahead and put those down. And I will ink my other plate in the Calypso Coral. And then I will cut these out with a Big Shot. So I've got my Big Shot, I've got my magnetic platform, or you could use the one that comes with it. I've got one cut up plate, my cardstock, my framelits on my shapes. If you have one of those that's like wants to jump to the next dot over, I guess this one is too, a little bit of retired washi tape or a sticky note, something that's not going to stick to your cardstock is good to use. As I mentioned, these two are on the same stamp and on the same framelit, so getting those to fit right is very easy. I'll put the second plate on top, run that through. I do need to run this through a second time, so I'm going to place my framelits where I want them and run that through. And then, assuming you do not move the stamps, you can then use this as a template. And for instance, these are the orange ones, so I'm going to just put these back in. Then once your puzzle pieces are there, you can ink your stamps again and just close up your stamp apparatus. Press on your stamps, and of course they may stick here. There's no magnet that will be small enough to get in there, and your pieces will be perfect. Now if one of these stamps gets moved, you can just stick it in your template, get it centered where you want it again, and close it up. There is just one more thing I need to stamp. I need to stamp the jar lid in Versamark ink. And this will fit on some of those scraps of you. Versamark is an ink that you really can't see, but it stays wet and maybe a little sticky for a while. I'm sprinkling this with silver embossing powder, and it just takes a tiny bit. This lasts forever. Put it back in the jar, pulling in my heat tool. I'll just be melting the powder. This is really some sort of wax. Once the heat tool gets hot, the magic happens really quickly. I just love that. And pulling in my Big Shot again and topping it with a clear plate and rolling that through. And I think I'm ready to assemble, so I'm putting my white piece on my Daffodil Delight piece. Whatever adhesive you like. And I'm going to put my Daffodil Delight on my Calypso Coral, but just this bottom half. So I usually put the adhesive on the smaller piece, and I'm lining it up here so I can kind of see where my limit is. And then if I line it up at the top, and that part's done. Put the inside piece on the inside. We need to put some sort of stop here to keep this in place, so I'm going to put one of my leaves inside. So I'm going to put this onto the cardstock. Could actually stamp that one if you wanted to. We want to put the other stem in the jar. So I'm going to kind of lean this, and I'm leaving this top loose. And I went ahead and cut out that jar with the window sheet And that little bit of gloss really adds to this project, but the glue dots will show. So I'm going to put one glue dot in this bottom left corner where the jar lid will go, and I'll put the other one on top where a flower will go, and that will be enough to hold this jar down. We'll put a couple of dimensionals on the jar lid and kind of tip it up here. Another flower on a dimensional on top of there, and we'll just scatter these flowers. You might want to use some of the mini dimensionals on the smaller flowers. I'm putting a bow on the inside to act as a stop. So that's all there is, one fold and one little simple element to act as a stop, and you've got a fancy fold card. If you would like the full directions, come on over to bevadams.com. You can print out your own directions with the image here. The direct link is right here on the video. If you're watching on YouTube, you can look down below for the link as well. Thank you for stopping by. Talk to you soon.